Welcome to Real Life Fiction Stories, and thank you for joining me. Tonight's story, which I'm told is true, comes from a friend of mine. A story that just so happens to occur in an area not too far from here, on a night not unlike tonight. A story about two friends who go out to explore nature, but find something they were not prepared for. Something that claims hundreds of lives in the world's forests every year. Something that once takes hold, never lets go.
So there he was, cruising down the road, when he comes up on this hairpin, right? But he's going just a little too fast and wasn't expecting the gravel on the road. So he hits this patch of gravel at 70, right? Bike goes right from under him. Dusty goes rolling out, tumbling arm over arm right off the edge of a cliff. Here's the crazy part, though. Dusty falls 100 feet down into this ravine, just skipping along down the slope, right? Bam! Lands with his shoulder against this big-ass boulder. But he's still alive. Some car behind him had seen the whole thing, though, right? So she calls 911. And she starts shouting down at him that rescue is on the way. So Dusty's laying there 45 minutes later when they show up and they call down to him. He's still conscious and he starts yelling back, I'm here, I'm here. They yell back at him, don't move. But he's excited, right? So he starts wiggling around, moving what he can just to make sure they can see him. Not knowing a rattlesnake had snuggled up right next to him when he'd been still as a dead man and strikes him in the face through his open visor. No way. That didn't happen. Swear to God, man, that totally happened. Totally could have survived the wreck if he had been cool. Yeah, I'm not sure it did happen. And if it did, I'm sure you got the facts wrong.
Oscar countered incredulously. Oscar had known Ricky for about a year now. They had met at work, both stocking shelves at Barter Ben's bargain bins. He liked the guy well enough, just always got a strong vibe of needing to impress coming off of him. They decided to go on a camping trip and hike up Satan's Spine, a mild but day-and-a-half long hike that ended at some of the best fishing in the mountains. The two men packed up and drove 40 miles on some of the most lonely, desolate mountain roads the two had ever seen. They parked their car at the trailhead and set out to their spot. They had made good time and managed to shave half a day off the promised day-and-a-half long trip they had expected. They were now into their second day of their 4-day trip and just coming back from a strikeout fishing session. The sun had set, and the two had headlamps, but kept them off to let the full moon light up their path, like a silver torch never flickering, save for the shadows of the trees and the occasional cloud.
I'll tell you what, my man.
Ricky's face suddenly trading cheerfulness for sincerity.
Not only do I know it happened, but I saw it. I was the guy that pulled his wheezing, dying body up the ravine after I beat the snake next to him to death with a stick.
Ricky was now staring at Oscar with an intensity that made Oscar shiver. Just before a smile rolled over Ricky's face, and the two men started to laugh. Though only one of them was sure why.
You're a crazy dude, Ricky. I can never tell if what you say is serious or seriously bullshit,
Oscar said with a chuckle.
Hey, Oscar, check it out.
Ricky was pointing to a narrow path branching off of the main trail. It was dark and overgrown, but opened up into a tree tunnel, with the boughs overhead interwoven, as if the trees on either side of the path were reaching out for one another. The path between them was long, and with no perceivable end, save for the bend barely visible in the flashlight's yellow circle, its farthest visible point.
Want to check it out?
Ricky said, smiling, raising his eyebrows in excitement and hope.
Not really, man. It's dark. It's late. I'm hungry. I just want to eat and crash out. I want to hit that fishing spot earlier again. I think we started too late today. Come on, Oscar, just a quick peek. Look, it curves up around ahead. Let's just see what's around the corner. You're gonna make and clean up after dinner and put the cooking gear away, right? Cross my heart and hope to die, my dude. My word is my bond.
Oscar stared at him blankly, before flicking on his headlamp and turning to walk up the path of the tree tunnel.
Yeah,
Ricky exclaimed quietly, crouching down and pumping his fists in victory before flicking on his headlamp as well.
Living life to the fullest, my man. You have to, you know? There was this time I was working as a caregiver for this ex-celebrity's kid.
The footsteps of the two men and Ricky's voice were swallowed by the dark as they made their way further down the path, golden light shining from their heads. As the two looked around, their circles of light bounced from ground to tree canopy to shrubbery walls, back to ground again, Before long, they had reached the bend in the path. "Whoa, holy shit, man, that's creepy," Oscar had said more to himself than to Ricky, who stood beside him equally slack-jawed. The path had become less overgrown, and the trees more evenly spread apart along the trail's edges, purposely placed to line the path, and far enough apart to let the moon cast some of its broken light through. On the other side of the trees along the trail was open meadows for hundreds of yards, before meeting the sheer mountain slope that encircled the tiny valley. The path ended along with the tree tunnel 100 yards from the porch of an old derelict cabin sat in the back of the meadow, with the odd pine tree or two standing like timeless sentinels, keeping watch over the long-abandoned property. There was a figure of something crumbled or sat in what might have been a chair on the porch, but it was too far and too dark to see exactly what it was. "Let's go check it out," Oscar said, suddenly reveling in the discovery.
Oh, look who found their balls. Look, man, I think it's pretty awesome what we found out here, too. It's just a little, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, if you catch what I'm saying? Look, Ricky, this was your idea to check this trail out, and now when it leads to something worth exploring, you're gonna puss out?
"No, I'm not gonna puss out," Ricky said sheepishly, looking at the ground, before smirking and raising his eyes to Oscar.
"Beat you to the porch?"
And with that, Ricky took off at full sprint, before stopping hard as if hitting an invisible wall only a few yards into his run. A cloud had finished passing over the moon, allowing its light to cascade over the cabin's porch.
What the fuck?
Ricky let his words trail off. He was staring in complete shock at the mass on the porch. Oscar jogged up behind him, his mouth agape and eyes unblinking, fixated on the same figure. It looked like a desiccated corpse in a rocking chair. The moonlight again faded, allowing the darkness to once again smother the earth as another cloud made its way across its face, and the body again was shrouded in black.
"Did you see that?"
Ricky blurted out in disbelief.
"That was a freaking dead body, man. No way, no freaking way, man. We have to go check it out."
Oscar responded with no control over the volume or pitch of his voice.
"Check it out? What the hell do you mean, check it out? Look, man, it might be nothing. Maybe our eyes playing tricks, or what if it's a murder victim?" "Exactly. What if it is a murder victim, Oscar? Are you seriously telling me you're going to stroll up to a dead body you found unarmed and start inspecting it like you're Sherlock Holmes? Dude, that. Let's go back and call the cops." "No, man. Listen, if it really isn't a dead body, the cops are going to be all pissed we wasted their time. We're going to look like total jackasses. Besides, man, did you see how it looked? Not exactly fresh. Looked like it had been drying outside for a while and became mummified. And that's weird too, man. Why hasn't anything eaten it? There's tons of out here that would make a meal out of his ass right quick. Oscar, I'm not going up there to poke at a dead body. I don't care why it's here. I don't care why nothing is eating it. I don't care if it's fresh, and I don't care if it's even a dead body or not. You know why, Oscar? Because this is not my business. None of this."
Ricky waved his arms wildly, gesturing to the cabin and the area around it.
"Is my business. It's the cops' business, Oscar,"
Ricky said, finally calming down and dropping his voice to a whisper after realizing he had been yelling. Oscar stared at him with desperation in his eyes, and when he saw no change in Ricky, his desperation turned to resolution.
"Look, I'm going to check it out. No way I will sleep tonight not knowing for sure and seeing with my own eyes what the hell it is. You don't want to go? That's cool. At least hang back and watch out so if something does come out of the shadows or rushes out of the cabin and I can't kill it before it kills me, you can tell the cops what got me." "You're a moron,"
Ricky said flatly.
"If anything pops out, I'll be halfway down the path running my ass off back home before I see anything happen to you."
Oscar smiled and started creeping slowly toward the cabin.
"Hey, Ricky,"
Oscar whispered loud enough that he might as well have just spoken.
"Keep looking behind you on the trail. You never know if something circled around behind us."
Ricky's eyes widened at that. He had never considered that. He began to spin around wildly, squinting into the dark, trying to perceive figures hidden among the shadows and leaves.
"Wait up,"
Ricky finally called after Oscar.
"Better help you fight off any killer. I'd feel guilty letting you die." "Thanks, man,"
Oscar said, smiling.
"Of course, if he has a gun, we're both screwed anyway."
Oscar paused his slinking up to the porch momentarily to consider this. They could have a gun, but the chances seemed more likely to him that any armed attacker would have already presented themselves at this point, seeing as how loud Ricky had been in his protests. As the two men approached the cabin, they had first thought their eyes were playing tricks on them. As clouds passed over the moon, bathing the cabin in shadow and light sporadically, It seemed to repair itself. The closer they got, the less dilapidated it seemed to become.
"Are you seeing this, man?"
Ricky asked Oscar.
"Gotta be the light playing tricks,"
Oscar said. But it wasn't. Holes suddenly closed up, missing boards appeared, window glass became whole again. The two stopped again. The figure on the porch had been changing as well. Muscle, fat, and flesh grew over bone. Hair appeared and grew while eyeballs filled empty sockets and became moist before blinking as if awakening after a long sleep.
Hello, my friends. Not often I see folks around my place. Usually they know better to stay away, though I myself mean no one any harm. This place, though.
The man on the porch's words were kind, yet foreboding, and were left unfinished, and had caused the two men to jump back with a gasp, and Ricky check his pants. Thank God it had only been a fart.
"How the hell did you do that?"
Oscar barked out suddenly, as he himself stepped backward again, as if simultaneously trying to find some hidden trick he had missed, and also preparing for the man to fly at him, trying to suck his blood. Oscar didn't really believe he was looking at a vampire, but he didn't know what the hell his eyes had just seen. So while he truly deep down in his soul didn't believe anything supernaturally ominous was happening, he still prepared just in case, unconsciously gripping the silver crucifix around his neck his girlfriend had given him. The man on the porch saw this, and smiled, and began to rock in his chair before speaking. The two men, enveloped in consternation, stood quietly and listened.
A long, long time ago, my dear friends, I had come to this valley from back east for the same reasons hundreds of other folks were headed out west. I was looking for gold. After months of surveying potential claims with nothing to show for it, I came across this tiny valley. I had only been at it for a few months, but already I was pulling more gold out of these valley walls than I dared to have imagined. One day, a local tribe had sent a man to try and get me to leave. He tried to tell me the land was cursed, that it lay between the spirit world and our world. He said one could fall between the two and become trapped forever, stuck between life and death, unable to leave for the rest of eternity. I calmly explained to the gentleman that if it was all the same to him, I wasn't going anywhere until I mined that valley dry, and if that meant me falling into some space between worlds, I was going to make damn sure I'd have enough gold with me to buy my way out from whatever godforsaken creature haunts the unknown depths of such an eternal void. When that didn't work, I pointed my revolver at the man, cocked the hammer, and simply said, "I'm staying." That got the message across, and truthfully looking back, I now know he was fully aware of what would happen to me and wrote me off like piss in the wind. He hadn't come to threaten me, but genuinely warned me. No one came back after that. I decided to make a trip to town and visit the assayer and cash in on a little bit of my savings. I set out early, wanting to get as far as possible before the sun set that day, to avoid camping an extra day with my saddlebags full of gold. The moon was as full as it is now, so the going was easy enough. I was admiring the treed seedlings I'd been able to start and plant along my home's path to the main trail, when my horse began to act strange. She would buck and whinny and pull left and right as if something were right in front of her, waving her back. Before she could buck me off, I dismounted and tried to lead her on, but something spooked her, and she pulled, and her reins slipped from my hands. She ran off the road into the meadow and stopped suddenly, whinnying and rearing up. I had just about started after her when I saw what she saw. I saw them. They were the dead, their bodies taken by the forest and their souls cast into the emptiness between life and death. They were hideous, decaying forms one second, then desperate, pained human faces the next, constantly changing back and forth. They were everywhere, hundreds of them. They would appear and disappear like smoke in a breeze and suddenly be somewhere else. They reached for my horse, and as soon as their hands touched her, she turned to ash and dust that blew away in the night wind. I couldn't do anything but stare at the figures, who in turn stared back at me, but didn't move otherwise. It was as if they were waiting to see what I was going to do. I heard something behind me, and right after I myself, I spun around only to find the ghost of my horse standing there, just off the road, shimmering in the light, as she changed from rotten flesh falling off bone to a healthy brown coat shining in the moonlight. I turned and ran, determined to get away from that valley. I ran and ran, but each step I found myself more and more tired than I should have been. I felt weak, like my life was draining out of me. I tried to push on but could go no further, and I collapsed. I looked at my hands and they were wrinkled and aged, like the hands of a man well over 100. I tried to call out, but the voice that left my throat was the frail voice of an old man with no strength to yell. I touched my face and felt the skin sagging and weathered, well beyond the prime of youth I had been in prior. I knew I couldn't make it to town. I looked behind me, and nothing had been following me. They all stayed just off the road staring at me. I crawled slowly back toward the cabin, and as I did, I felt my strength return. My skin grow tight and my muscles fill in. All the while, my personal audience of ghouls looked on. When I had gotten back, I was fully renewed. I can never leave this place, and the longer you stay, the more lost you will become until you can no longer leave, and you'll end up like my friends here.
The old man broke his gaze from the two men, looking just behind them, causing them to turn their heads and look behind them as well. The fields on either side of the path were aglow with the ethereal light of the undead, scattered throughout the meadows. The faces of those lost to the forest stared at the two, forever changing their corporeal form between corpse, tormented person, and nothing at all. Ricky said nothing, as he sprinted down the path back the way they had come, mouth agape in silent scream. Oscar had been too stunned to realize what Ricky was doing, and as realization dawned on him, he took one brief look back at the man on the porch.
"Stay on the path, my friend,"
the man said with a smile, and Oscar bolted after Ricky. Ricky was fast, but Oscar was faster. In no time he had caught up and passed his friend, yelling,
"Stay on the path!"
as he passed. The arms of the undead reached for them as they ran, though they did not chase after. There were too many of them to warrant the need. They made it through the tree tunnel and back on their path to camp, but apparitions continued to surround them in every direction. The two men's legs burned and strained, and every breath was fire filling their lungs, but they did not slow down.
"We gotta get the car keys, man! They're in my tent!"
Ricky yelled at Oscar's back. Oscar said nothing. The two rounded another bend in the trail and saw their camp in the distance, but something was off. The camp was not aglow due to the full moon, but rather the faint glow of the apparitions which had surrounded their camp. Oscar ran toward Ricky's tent and had pulled his fishing knife from his belt as he dove at the tent door and slashed, grabbing Ricky's backpack with the keys inside. Oscar jumped to his feet, but before he could make one step forward, an icy hand gently fell on his shoulder. Ricky's eyes were locked with Oscar's, both men equally shocked as the bag dropped from Oscar's grasp, and his ashes blew away into the night. Ricky crumpled to the floor and sat there staring at Oscar's apparition, morphed from desiccated remains to his friend from work, and back again. He had tried talking to him, but Oscar only stared with sad, hungry eyes that were hollow and no longer his friends. Ricky sat there until the sun came up, hoping they would disappear with the night. They remained. He thought about walking back the 18 miles to the truck, then the 40 miles back to town, but knew the chances of someone coming up this way were slim, maybe too slim to gamble on. He didn't think he had 60 miles in him. He was starving, and the food was in Oscar's tent, and he could only carry about 16 ounces of water. He might make it, but he might not. He thought about what happened to Dusty, how if he had just been cool and calm, the rescue that was so close would have been able to save him. He looked around and allowed himself to see more than just the dead around him. He saw sticks on the side of the trail, and one just long enough to reach his backpack. Ricky jumped up and grabbed the stick, using it to reach desperately for his bag. It was on the second try he was able to run it through the shoulder strap, lifting it gently and slowly, while the eyes of the dead watched on, emotionless as they shifted their form. Keys in hand, Ricky made the trek back to the truck, just as the sun once again was disappearing behind the mountain peaks. Ricky had reported his friend missing, and after a search party searched the area and only managed to find the equipment they had left behind, they had Ricky take a lie detector test to corroborate his story. He passed. He technically never lied, but he never told the full story either. It was true he and Oscar had gone on a camping trip. It was true the two had gotten scared at an old cabin and felt like they should get out of there. It was true Oscar had cut open Ricky's tent, hurrying to get the keys so the two could make their escape. It was true that Oscar had been there one moment at camp and gone the next, leaving the bag and keys for Ricky. And it was true that Ricky did not kill Oscar. Ricky had led the search party and hoped and prayed the ghouls would show themselves, maybe even Oscar, and he would be able to explain everything in detail. But they never showed themselves. The official story is just another hiker gone missing, and Ricky can't prove anything beyond that. He continues to live with the suspicions and accusations of others, and the secrets that he can never share.